Picture this. It's 1935.
Right. So right in the middle of the Great Depression.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm.
The world is just in the throes of it. And you're looking at this 24-year-old guy in Scotland.
Okay.
And he's a college dropout. He recently spent time working as a cook in Paris, just, slaving away in this hot hotel kitchen. But right now, his daily reality is, well, it's quite different.
Yeah, drastically different.
Yeah. His job is knocking on doors. He's just trudging from house to house trying to sell this massive, incredibly expensive cast iron British stove called an Aga cooker.
Oh, man.
Right. Most people would they grit their teeth, try to survive a grueling job like that and look for an exit. But this guy, he sits down, analyzes every single interaction he has, and he writes a guide for his fellow door-to-door salesmen.
Which is just wild for a 24-year-old to do.
It really is. A guide that, decades later, Fortune magazine would look back on and actually call probably the best sales manual ever written.
It is an absolutely legendary document. I mean, it's famous. And the tension here, the real mystery that we're looking at today, is how a handbook written nearly a century ago about selling a giant piece of cast iron that basically just, bakes bread and heats bathwater.
Right.
How does that somehow contain the ultimate timeless laws of modern business, marketing, and persuasion?
It's crazy. Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive into Chapter 1 of the book, The Unpublished David Ogilvy. For our YouTube audience joining us today, our mission is to really just unpack the foundational philosophies of a very young David Ogilvy.
Yeah.
We're focusing heavily on two things here. First, that legendary 1935 Aga cooker sales manual. Mm-hmm. And second, a famously blunt memo that he wrote to his advertising agency just a year later in 1936.
Right.
So if you're interested in entrepreneurship or business or, literally just getting someone to say yes to an idea you have, this chapter is a masterclass.
It really is. I mean, it proves that the core mechanics of persuading people haven't changed in 90 years. Yeah. And the reason for that is incredibly simple, though we often forget it. Human nature just hasn't changed.
Right. The technology changes, but we don't.
Exactly. The tools change, the platforms change, but the psychological triggers that make a person actually trust you or, open their wallet, they are exactly the same today as they were on a doorstep in Scotland in 1935.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand those triggers, I feel like we really need to start with the bedrock principles of persuasion. So let's look at 1936. Ogilvy is 25 years old at this point.
He's a kid, really.
Basically, yeah. He's moved from selling stoves door to door to working as an assistant account executive at an advertising agency.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's a pretty junior guy, yet somehow he gets the entire staff of his agency as an audience for his views on advertising. He writes this manifesto, a pronunciamento as he called it, laying down these absolute ironclad rules for how to communicate.
And what stands out immediately is just the sheer audacity of it.
Yeah.
A 25-year-old dictating the laws of advertising to his superiors. It takes some nerve. But what is even more wild is that 27 years later, when he is the chairman of one of the biggest, most powerful agencies in the entire world, he sends this exact same memo to his board of directors.
No way.
Yeah, he attaches a note to it saying, "I have learned nothing new in the subsequent 27 years.
That is an unbelievable level of confidence.
Oh, absolutely.
But I suppose when you look at the rules he actually laid out, you can start to see why they held up so well.
Precisely. If we look at the core of that 1936 memo, it is remarkably austere. Like, he demanded, for instance, that every single ad must tell the whole sales story.
The whole thing.
Right. He argued that the public doesn't read advertisements in a series.
Oh.
You cannot assume that the person looking at your pitch today saw last week's ad or, remembers your billboard from a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
You have to treat every interaction as if it is the only chance you will ever get to make your case.
That makes a lot of sense. You can't rely on them remembering part one.
Exactly. Furthermore, he demanded that the copy be human and very simple. He utterly despised fine language, flowery prose, self-conscious artwork, all of it.
Right, because he actually said those things only serve to make buyers wary, right?
Yes, exactly.
He believed that every single word must count. Concrete figures beat atmospheric claims, facts beat cliches, and empty exhortations, shouting at the customer to buy now, that has to give way to alluring, tangible offers.
Right. Give them a real reason.
Yeah. But here's the part of the memo that really stopped me in my tracks. He drops this massive hammer on humor.
Oh, yeah.
He writes that facetiousness is dear to the amateur but anathema to the professional. He says point blank, people do not buy from clowns.
Permanent success has rarely been built on frivolity. That was his stance. It's a very strict view of business communication, and it goes directly against the grain of a lot of modern instincts.
Which is exactly why I want to push back on it.
Okay, let's hear it.
People do not buy from clowns. I mean, let's look at the world right now. We live in an era of TikTok, of meme marketing, of massive corporate brands roasting each other on social media.
Right, the Wendy's Twitter account kind of thing.
Exactly. Isn't being a clown exactly how brands go viral today? We see companies getting millions of views and massive engagement just by being totally unhinged online. How can Ogilvy say frivolity doesn't work when we see it working every single day?
That is the perfect question to ask, because it really forces us to define what working actually means. What's fascinating here is the fundamental distinction between capturing fleeting attention and securing a permanent customer.
Okay.
Ogilvy isn't talking about getting someone to look at you for 5 seconds while they scroll on their phone on the toilet, right? He's talking about the psychology of parting with money.
So attention versus transaction.
Exactly. When you are asking someone to make a serious investment, whether that is buying a luxury cast iron cooker in 1935 or, signing a massive B2B software contract today, trust is the ultimate currency. Let's use an analogy. Imagine you need to hire an engineer to build a bridge for your town.
Okay.
If one of the candidates shows up to the pitch meeting wearing a clown nose and juggling bowling pins, they will absolutely capture your attention.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to look at them.
Right. You will probably take a video and share it. But you are not going to hire them to build the bridge.
No, definitely not.
Because the cognitive dissonance is too high. You question their underlying competence, even if their math happens to be perfect. Entertainment is just not the same as trust.
That is a great way to put it. You might laugh at the clown, but you don't hand your life savings to one.
Precisely. And that psychological mechanism, it ties directly into his absolute hatred of superlatives. In the same memo, Ogilvy attacks words like the best, the greatest, the most incredible.
Right.
He said those words belong to the marketplace, like the chaotic, noisy bazaar, and they have absolutely no place in a serious advertisement.
Because they sound like hyperbole, but I mean, is it really that damaging to call your product the best? I feel like everyone does that.
It is incredibly damaging, actually, because of how the human brain processes risk and credibility.
Yeah.
Think about the underlying psychology here. If I tell you a product is reliable, you might believe me.
Sure.
But if I tell you it is the absolute greatest, most miraculous technological invention in the history of mankind, your guard immediately goes up.
Yeah, my BS detector is going off.
Exactly. And here is the real danger. By overpromising in that one area, I have poisoned the well. The buyer starts doubting even my most basic factual claims.
I see. So, like, if I claim my new microphone is the greatest achievement in audio history, and then I say it also has a USB port, the buyer subconsciously starts wondering if it actually has a USB port.
Yes.
If I'm exaggerating the big things, I'm probably lying about the small things, too.
Precisely. You sacrifice your bedrock credibility for a cheap burst of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So the practical takeaway for the listener right out of the gate is to conduct a ruthless audit of your own communications.
Yeah.
Look at your resume, your pitch decks, your emails to clients. Are you relying on empty adjectives and superlatives? Are you trying too hard to be the entertainer in the room? If so, trim the fluff. Replace those adjectives with concrete, undeniable facts.
So we have this foundation. No clowns, no superlatives, just concrete facts and simple language. But how do you actually take that foundation out into the real world and deploy it? I feel like this brings us to the 1935 Aga Cooker Manual itself and what Ogilvy calls the art of the approach.
Oh, this section of the manual is just a masterclass in reading the socioeconomic landscape.
Yeah, it really is.
Ogilvy sets the stage by looking at the 1930s UK market reality. He notes that there are 12 million households in Great Britain. 1 million of those households own motor cars. But only 10,000 own Aga cookers.
Okay.
And his logic here is completely bulletproof. He says if a household can afford a motor car, they can absolutely afford an Aga.
It's essentially early demographic targeting, right? Like, he isn't just telling his guys to wander around knocking on every single door they see. He has defined a total addressable market based on a highly visible qualifier, the presence of a car in the driveway.
It is perfect market segmentation. I mean, it saves so much wasted time. But knowing who to talk to is only the prerequisite. The manual goes into astonishing detail about how to physically approach the house. And this is where Ogilvy's deep empathy for social dynamics really shines.
He gives very specific physical instructions.
Yeah.
He writes, dress quietly and shave well. And then he adds this very specific rule. He says, do not wear a bowler hat.
Right.
He also tells his salesmen, crucially, to always go to the back door. He says most salesmen go to the front door, a maneuver that is always resented by the maid and the mistress alike. Now, I want to pause here, going to the back door. In today's context, if a salesperson bypassed my front door and came around to the back of my house, I would find that incredibly invasive.
So complete.
It feels like you're sneaking around. Why was this the golden rule for him?
Well, to understand that, we have to unpack the class structure and household dynamics of 1930s Britain.
Okay, lay it on me.
Let's start with the bowler hat. In that era, a bowler hat was a very specific class signifier. It screamed city businessman, manager, or debt collector.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If a salesman wearing a bowler hat approached a house, it immediately put the household staff, who were, working class, on the defensive. It was an assertion of superiority. By telling his men not to wear it, Ogilvy is telling them to lower their status to appear non-threatening and approachable.
So it's about minimizing visual friction before you even speak a single word.
Exactly. And the backdoor rule follows the exact same logic. In a wealthy 1930s household, the kind that owned a car and could afford an aga, the front door was for formal guests and social equals of the homeowners.
Right.
If a salesman knocks on the front door, it forces the maid to drop whatever she is doing in the kitchen, walk all the way through the formal part of the house, and deal with the stranger. That annoys the maid.
Obviously.
It also annoys the mistress of the house, who has to hear the interruption and the commotion.
It disrupts the entire social order of the house.
Precisely. But the back door leads directly to the kitchen. It is the working domain of the house. By going to the back door, you are meeting the staff on their own turf, respectfully, without forcing them to perform the formalities of the front door. You are aligning yourself with the workers who will actually be using the stove you are trying to sell.
That is fascinating. It's not about sneaking around at all. It's about respecting the operational flow of the environment you are entering.
Exactly.
And he applies this same hyper-observant logic to timing, too. He warns his salesmen, whatever you do, do not call between 12 and 2 p.m. because you will not be welcome.
Nope.
That is the peak stress time for a kitchen preparing lunch. Instead, he suggests an incredibly unorthodox time. He says, try calling after supper in the summer.
It's a brilliant strategic pivot. He literally writes, in general, study the methods of your competitors and do the exact opposite.
Doing the exact opposite. Thinking about this physical door-to-door strategy from the 1930s, it maps perfectly onto modern B2B sales and digital networking. It is exactly like figuring out how to bypass a crowded email inbox today.
Oh, that's interesting. How do you mean?
Well, think about the front door of a modern corporation.
Okay.
It's the generic contact email, or like the CEO's main inbox at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Everyone is knocking on that front door. It is heavily guarded by spam filters, algorithms, and annoyed executive assistants.
The modern equivalent of the maid and the mistress.
Exactly. If you just hammer away at that front door, you are creating friction. Finding the back door today might mean engaging thoughtfully with an executive's work on a niche platform, or, reaching out to a parallel team member, or maybe sending a pitch at 7 p.m. on a Thursday when they are scrolling through their phone on the couch and their defenses are down.
That is a phenomenal parallel. The mechanism of human resistance is identical, whether it's a physical door in Scotland or a digital firewall.
Yeah.
And to make that backdoor approach work, Ogilvy stresses one more vital component, which is research.
Okay.
He writes, find out all you can about your prospects before you call on them, their general living conditions, wealth, profession, hobbies, friends, and so on. He promises that every single hour spent in this kind of research will help you and impress your prospect.
He is begging them not to go in blind.
Basically, yeah.
So the takeaway for anyone listening, do not be the 100th generic email in the inbox. Do the opposite of your competitors. Do the research, understand the context of your prospect world, and approach them in a way that minimizes friction before you even open your mouth.
And once you have done that research, once you have bypassed the front door and found the right moment, you have to actually make the pitch.
Right.
Ogilvy calls this next section the attack. And his absolute mandate here is hyper-personalization.
Yes. He tells his salesmen to avoid standardizing their sales talk at all costs. There's this fantastic quote that I absolutely love.
Let's hear it.
He says, "If you find yourself one fine day saying the same things to a bishop and a trapezist, you are done for."
It's such a vivid, brilliant image. The bishop and the trapezist. I mean, they might live on the same street. They might both have the money to buy the stove. But the underlying psychological reasons they will ultimately make the purchase are just galaxies apart.
Completely different worlds.
Right. Ogilvy understood deeply that a product is never just a collection of features. It is a specific solution to a specific person's problem. And so, he forces his salesman to identify 12 completely different arguments and deploy them based entirely on who is standing in front of them.
Let's actually dig into some of these tailored arguments because the level of psychological targeting is incredible to me. Let's start with the stockbroker.
Okay.
How do you sell a stove to a stockbroker? You don't talk about baking bread. You appeal to his obsession with numbers, efficiencies, and returns on investment.
Makes sense.
Ogilvy highlights the AGA's guaranteed maximum fuel consumption of 4 pounds a year. He tells the salesman to stress that no cook, however stupid or extravagant they might be, can possibly make the stove burn more fuel than that.
Right.
And then he adds this brilliant little joke for the salesman to use. He says to tell the stockbroker that if more fuel is consumed, it means the cook is stealing coal and the police should be called in immediately.
It's a masterful psychological stroke.
It's so clever.
First, he is speaking the stockbroker's native language, guarantees, maximums, fixed costs. But the joke is where the real magic happens.
How so?
By making a joke about the cook stealing coal, the salesman aligns himself with the stockbroker against a hypothetical problem. It builds instant rapport based on a shared worldview of management and efficiency. They're suddenly on the same team.
Contrast that with how he tells them to approach a doctor.
Right.
You are not talking to a medical professional about a 4-pound fuel guarantee. For the doctor, you are selling a concept he calls always ready.
Always ready.
You paint a picture for the doctor. When a medical case keeps them out late, long past normal dinner hours, they will come home to an unspoilt meal. The stove is always on, the food is always warm day or night. Or you appeal to their clinical side. You tell the doctor the stove is so innately clean, so well designed, it wouldn't look out of place in the sterilizing room of an operating theater.
Notice what is happening here beneath the surface. Ogilvy not selling cast iron or heat retention or enamel finishing. To the doctor, he is selling a sleep aid.
Wow. Yeah.
He is selling a warm meal to an exhausted professional at 2 a.m. He is selling a cure for a specific pain point. He even goes so far as to mention how slow-cooked stews and porridges made on the AGA can cure stomach aches and heartburn for the dyspeptic. He frames the purchase of a stove as a medical mission.
It's brilliant. He's adapting the product to fit the worldview of the buyer, and he is so sharp about observation, too.
Oh, yeah?
In the cookery section, he warns the salesman to learn to recognize vegetarians on site. He says it is painful to gush over the perfection of roasting a beefsteak to a drooping face that hasn't enjoyed meat in years.
Which requires the salesman to be deeply, intensely present in the moment. You cannot just be running a pre-written script in your head. You have to be reading the visual and social cues of the person in front of you in real time.
Right.
Which actually brings us to perhaps the most fascinating and slightly bizarre piece of psychological advice in the entire manual, the joke instruction.
Yes. Okay, so he tells them to pepper their talk with anecdotes, but then he explicitly instructs them, and I'm quoting here, above all, laugh till you cry every time the prospect makes the joke about the Aga Khan.
Yeah.
Now, I read that, and I have to admit, I don't actually know who the Aga Khan is or why this was a joke. Why was this so important?
Well, it requires a bit of historical context. Aga Khan III was a wildly famous, incredibly wealthy global figure at the time.
Okay.
He was the spiritual leader of the Ismaili Muslims, one of the founders of the All India Muslim League, and famously owned champion racehorses. He was international royalty, constantly in the news.
Oh, I see.
So when wealthy British prospects were presented with a luxury stove called the Aga, they would inevitably make a pun connecting this cast iron cooker to this famous billionaire royal. It was essentially the ultimate 1930s dad joke.
Ah, okay. So every single prospect thought they were the very first person to ever make this clever pun.
Exactly. And the instinct of an amateur salesman, hearing the exact same terrible joke for the 1,000th time that month, is to roll their eyes or maybe offer a polite, tight, fake smile so they can move on with the pitch.
Yeah, just get through it.
But Ogilvy says no. You must laugh till you cry. Why? Because a deadly serious, entirely logical demonstration is bound to fail. He writes, "If you can't make a lady laugh, you certainly cannot make her buy."
Validating their ego.
Yes, he understands that making the prospect feel clever, witty, and appreciated is infinitely more powerful than rushing to the next bullet point on your spec sheet.
Yeah.
The prospect's ego is an undeniable part of the transaction. If you make them feel good about themselves, they associate that positive feeling with your product.
So the takeaway for anyone listening to this is profound. You have to identify the bishop and the trapezist in your own professional life. If you are pitching a new project internally at your company, the chief financial officer needs a completely different value proposition than the creative director. You cannot standardize your pitch. You have to speak to their specific anxieties, their specific metrics of success, and yes, you even have to validate their specific egos.
That is the core of the attack. But, as Ogilvy knew well, even with the most perfectly tailored empathetic pitch, you're eventually going to face resistance.
Always.
The prospect will push back. Which brings us to the section Ogilvy labels the defense.
The handling of objections. I feel like most people view objections as a failure. When someone says no or what about this problem, we tend to panic and see it as a sign that the pitch is going off the rails.
Sure, it feels like rejection.
But Ogilvy flips this entire concept on its head. He says that when you are faced with questions and objections, you should take it as a highly positive sign that the prospect's brain is in working order. It means they are actually conscientiously considering the product.
Right. He draws a sharp contrast between a talkative prospect and a dumb prospect. And by dumb, he means a prospect who is completely silent, who doesn't speak or raise any concerns.
Ah, I see.
He argues that a silent prospect is usually a deaf prospect. They aren't engaging, they're just waiting for you to leave. An objection, on the other hand, is a handhold. It gives you a piece of their psychological puzzle to grip onto. But he issues a very stern warning against handling these objections too academically.
Right. He uses this fantastic analogy. He says some salesmen expound on the subject of the stove so academically that at the end of the explanation, the prospect feels as inclined to buy the stove as they would to buy the planet Jupiter after a broadcast from the Astronomer Royal.
It is the classic trap of trying to sound too smart.
Yeah.
The prospect raises a concern, and the salesman tries to overwhelm them with technical jargon about thermodynamics and heat storage principles to prove their expertise.
Yeah.
But what actually happens?
They tune out.
Exactly. The buyer just disconnects. They feel small or confused or bored. Ogilvy is saying you have to handle objections in a way that keeps the product grounded in the prospect's daily, tangible reality. Do not be the Astronomer Royal talking about Jupiter. Be a helpful guide in their kitchen.
And he gives incredibly specific examples of how to execute this. Take the most common physical objection, it is too big for my kitchen.
Right. It's a huge piece of iron.
Yeah, the prospect looks at a brochure of this massive iron block and says it won't fit. Ogilvy tells his salesman, your internal response to that objection should be baloney.
Baloney.
It only looks big because it goes all the way to the floor and doesn't stand on little legs like a normal gas stove.
Yeah.
But here is the genius move. He says, use this objection as a pretext. Say to the prospect, let's go measure it, and use that momentum to walk right into their kitchen.
It is the physical manifestation of turning a negative into a positive.
Here is where it gets really interesting to me, because the spatial psychology of that kitchen measurement tactic is off the charts.
Oh,
Think about the dynamics. The prospect throws up a wall, it's too big. Instead of standing at the back door arguing about cubic dimensions and trying to convince them with math, the salesman agrees to investigate the problem together. But doing so requires physically crossing the threshold, entering the most intimate working space of the house, and continuing the conversation from the inside. He literally uses the objection as a bridge to enter their world.
It completely reframes the relationship. You instantly shift from being an outsider trying to push a product in to becoming an insider collaborating with them to solve a spatial puzzle in their own home.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It changes the entire power dynamic of the interaction. You are now a consultant, not a peddler.
Okay, but what about the ultimate objection? The price.
Ah, the big one.
These Aga cookers were incredibly expensive luxury items, especially in the 1930s during an economic depression. What happens when a prospect asks, what about the price, before the salesman has built up enough value to reveal it? Ogilvy writes that the way you reply to this specific question is the supreme test of your salesmanship. And he gives an instruction that blew my mind. He says, your voice, your manner, your expression, even your smell must be controlled and directed to soften the blow.
Even your smell.
Even your smell.
It sounds almost absurd at first glance. But if we break down the biology of stress in high-stakes negotiations, it is incredibly profound.
Okay, how so?
Think about what happens when an inexperienced salesperson panics because the price question came up too early. Their heart rate spikes. They begin to sweat. They emit fear pheromones, literally changing how they smell.
Wow.
Their voice tightens, their pitch goes up, their facial expression freezes.
The broadcast panic.
Exactly. And human beings are highly evolved to detect micro-expressions of panic in others. The prospect picks up on that fear instantly. Subconsciously, the prospect thinks, if the salesman is terrified of the price, this thing must be wildly overpriced. It makes the cost seem even more unreasonable.
Ew.
Ogilvy is demanding total, absolute physiological control. You must be completely at ease with the enormous value you're presenting, so that when the heavy price drops, your entire physical demeanor signals to the buyer, of course it costs as much. It is worth every single penny.
So what is the practical takeaway for the listener when it comes to the defense? It is to fundamentally change your relationship with pushback. Do not fear objections. When your boss, your client, or even your partner objects to an idea you are pitching, it means they are actively engaging with it. Their brain is working.
Yes.
Do what Ogilvy did. Do not argue with them at the door. Use their objection as a bridge to pull them closer to the solution. Say, let's go measure the kitchen together.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, if we pull back and look at the synthesis of all this, connecting the austerity of the 1936 memo to the deep empathy of the 1935 Ogilvy Manual, the true soul of this chapter emerges. What Ogilvy realized at 24 years old is that true business brilliance, true persuasion, does not come from being overly clever. It doesn't come from being facetious or relying on technical jargon or using shiny superlatives to dazzle people into submission.
It's not about tricks.
No. Whether it is 1935 or today, permanent success comes from an intensely empathetic understanding of the actual human being standing in front of you.
Right.
It is about knowing their specific fears, their daily routines, their class anxieties, and even the repetitive, terrible jokes they like to tell. And once you understand them on that deep, granular level, you don't need tricks.
You just give them facts.
You just present them with undeniable, concrete facts that solve their specific problems. You sell the exhausted doctor a hot meal after a long shift. You sell the stockbroker a guaranteed return on investment.
It's profoundly human, which is why it hasn't aged a day. So what does this all mean for you as you go about your work week? Think about this. Ogilvy built the foundation of a global advertising empire by meticulously studying how a household operated in 1935. He paid attention to the maid, the mistress, the stress of the lunch hour, the ego of the homeowner.
Yes.
Today, we have more data on our customers than Ogilvy could have ever dreamed of. We have analytics, algorithms, AI predicting behavior, yet our pitches, our emails, and our interactions are often more robotic, more generic, and less empathetic than a guy knocking on a back door in Scotland 90 years ago. What are we losing in the age of automation when we forget to actually observe the human beings we are trying to serve?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. All the data in the world cannot replace the power of deep, localized empathy.
Something to mull over the next time you draft a pitch. Join us next time on The Deep Dive as we step into Chapter 2, where we leave the door-to-door grind behind and step into the high-stakes, smoke-filled boardrooms of Madison Avenue to uncover David Ogilvy's most brilliant notes, memos, and letters. Until then, remember to audit your adjectives.
What if I told you that the greatest secrets to building a billion-dollar brand or, creating an unbreakable company culture, and honestly, just literally selling anything to anyone, we're all hiding inside a door-to-door stove salesman's manual from 1935.
I mean, it sounds completely absurd, right? Because we're so conditioned to think of the golden age of advertising as this.
Right, like Mad Men.
Exactly, Mad Men. This playground of fast-talking manipulators and flashy Madison Avenue egos.
Yeah.
Cigarette smoke-filled rooms where people just kind of spun reality.
Yeah.
But the man who actually laid the foundation for modern commercial success, he built his empire on the exact opposite of that stereotype.
Yeah, so today we are diving into the mind of David Ogilvy, which, if you know the industry, he is widely considered the undisputed father of advertising.
Oh, absolutely.
But the reality of how he operated is just startling. We're talking about extreme, like almost painful factual research, relentless discipline, and this radical non-negotiable respect for the consumer's intelligence.
And we are getting this perspective straight from the rawest possible source today.
Yes.
We aren't looking at his polished best-selling books. We're looking at a curated collection called the Unpublished David Ogilvy.
Which is amazing.
It really is. It's this massive stack of internal memos, private letters, uh, highly confidential sales manuals, and off-the-cuff speeches spanning over 50 years.
Yeah, so our mission for this deep dive is to basically extract his core philosophies, like how you actually persuade people, how you lead difficult talent, and how you engineer a culture.
Right.
Because whether you are trying to get a startup off the ground, or you're managing a team, or just trying to understand the psychology of why we buy what we buy, this material is a masterclass. It's essentially a blueprint for how to build a legacy of first-class work while refusing to ever tolerate second-rate performance.
And what stands out immediately when you look at these raw documents is just the sheer consistency of his underlying philosophy. I mean, you have a 24-year-old Ogilvy knocking on back doors in Great Britain during the Depression. And then you have a 75-year-old chairman running a global workforce from a French chateau.
Right.
And the core psychological engine driving both of them is identical.
Which is wild. So I want to start with that 24-year-old salesman, because the idea that the blueprint for a global advertising empire begins with a heavy, wildly expensive iron stove is just fascinating. So he wrote a guide in 1935 called The Theory and Practice of Selling the Aga Cooker. This was for his fellow salesmen.
Yeah, and Fortune magazine later called it probably the best sales manual ever written.
Right. So how does a manual for selling a stove translate to high-end advertising?
It translates because the Aga Cooker manual is, well, at its core, it's a treatise on human psychology.
Okay.
The manual is actually divided into two distinct military-style headings, attack and defense.
Well, okay.
Yeah, and Ogilvy realized very early on that salesmanship isn't about having the loudest voice or, the slickest smile. It requires immense energy, time, and this kind of encyclopedic knowledge of the product.
Right.
The core of his attack strategy was hyper-tailored messaging based on just obsessive upfront research.
I was actually looking at the level of detail he demanded from his salesmen before they even approached a house. And honestly, it borders on espionage.
He really does.
He tells them to go to the back door, not the front, because the maid and the mistress both resent front door callers.
Right.
But beyond that, he demands they know the prospect's wealth, their profession, their hobbies, and their social circle before they even knock.
Yeah, because he was fundamentally opposed to the idea of a generic pitch.
Okay.
He explicitly warns his team that standardization in your sales talk is a death sentence. Like, he laid out a rule that I think every modern marketer should literally frame on their wall.
What's the rule?
He said, if you find yourself one fine day saying the same things to a bishop and a trapezist, you are done for.
Oh, wow. A bishop and a trapezist.
Yeah.
Let me challenge that, though. Because look at modern business. Look at the sauce industry or digital marketing. We worship standardization today.
We do.
Like, we build sales funnels and automated email sequences specifically so we don't have to reinvent the wheel for every single prospect. Isn't a standardized script just vastly more efficient for a scaling business?
Well, it depends entirely on how you define efficiency.
Okay.
If efficiency just means making the highest number of calls per hour, then yeah, sure, a script is efficient.
Right.
But Ogilvy understood that efficiency means absolutely nothing if the pitch doesn't convert. If you use a standardized script, you are basically sacrificing your single greatest psychological weapon.
Which is?
Relevance.
Because the trapezist doesn't care about the same things the bishop cares about.
Precisely. I mean, Ogilvy mapped out 12 completely different attack arguments just for this stove. 12. And he trained his salesmen to instantly diagnose the person in front of them and deploy only the relevant argument.
Okay, give me an example.
So if you were talking to a stockbroker, you only talk about the financial economy of the fuel savings.
Makes sense.
If you were talking to a doctor, you pivot entirely to how hygienic and sanitary the cast iron is. And if you are talking to the actual cook, you talk about the culinary precision.
That's brilliant. There's actually a note in the manual that made me laugh out loud where he tells the salesman, learn to recognize vegetarians on sight.
Yes.
And his reasoning is so sharp. He says it is deeply painful to gush over the incredible roasting and grilling capabilities of this stove to a homeowner who hasn't eaten a beefsteak in 10 years.
Exactly. It's a funny line, but the underlying mechanism is profound empathy. Don't talk about roasting meat. Talk about how the agar's constant radiant heat safely warms the kitchen for their children without the danger of open flames.
Wow, yeah.
He was demanding that salesmen stop selling the features of the product and start selling the specific lifestyle benefit that solves the unique problem of the human being standing in front of them.
And he was also incredibly strict about tone, wasn't he? Like, I noticed a distinct lack of the typical salesman hyperbole.
Oh, he despised empty superlatives.
Really?
Yeah, he wrote to his team, "Facetiousness in advertising is a device dear to the amateur."
Okay, yeah.
He literally said, "People do not buy from clowns."
People do not buy from clowns.
That's good.
Yeah, he didn't want his salesman saying the stove, saves you a ton of money. Because that's a meaningless claim.
Right. What does a ton mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wanted them saying it is mathematically guaranteed to burn less than 4 pounds worth of fuel a year.
Just strict facts.
Because concrete facts are vastly more persuasive than clever adjectives.
So that makes sense when you're on the attack.
Yeah.
But what happens when the prospect pushes back? Because we have to remember the context here. It's the 1930s, right in the Depression, and the Aga cooker was not some cheap appliance.
No, I don't know.
It's a massive luxury purchase. So how did he instruct them to handle the inevitable sticker shock?
Well, this is where we get to the defense section of the manual. And his psychological approach to defending price is just brilliant.
Okay.
He instructs them to control their physical reaction, their voice, their manner, even their smell.
Their smell. Yeah. He wanted them projecting absolute calm. But the core directive was this: never, ever apologize for the price.
Never apologize.
And he utilized a rather ruthless anecdote about a famous surgeon to really hammer this home to his sales team.
A surgeon? How does that relate to selling a stove?
Well, he told them the story of a famous surgeon who removes the appendix of a very poor patient, and he charges the man £100, which at the time was an astronomical sum.
Right.
So a friend of the surgeon is horrified and asks, "How much do you charge him?" And the surgeon says, £100.
Okay.
The friend says, "But how much did the poor man have?"
Oh, boy.
And the surgeon just flatly replies, £100.
Wow. That is incredibly cool.
It is cold, but look at the mechanism of what Ogilvy is teaching his team here.
Okay.
He isn't telling them to rob people. He is telling them that price is an objective reality. It's not a negotiation tactic.
Right, right.
Because if you flinch or if you apologize, you instantly signal to the buyer that even you don't believe the product is worth what you're asking. Oh.
That's such a good point.
Yeah. If you have proven the factual value of the stove, the fuel savings, the durability, and the prospect has the money, they will buy it. If they complain it's too expensive, Ogilvy told his men to compare it to a Rolls-Royce.
Because it's a luxury item.
Exactly. You don't mass-produce a Rolls-Royce, and you don't mass-produce an Aga. The price is the price, because the superlative quality demands it.
It strikes me that the level of neurotic preparation and emotional control he's demanding of a solitary stove salesman is one thing.
Yeah.
But how on earth do you take that hyper-individualized, almost obsessive-compulsive discipline and enforce it across a global agency of thousands of creative people without them just instantly mutinying?
Well, you can't enforce it if you hire the wrong people. And that brings us directly to his philosophy on leadership and scale. Ogilvy realized that to build a world-class organization, the filter for hiring had to prioritize character over raw talent.
Character over talent.
Yeah. He coined a phrase in his internal memos that became a mandate for the whole company. He said he only wanted to hire gentlemen with brains.
Okay, I need to pause on that phrase, gentlemen with brains, because in a British context, especially mid-century, that usually implies old Etonians.
Right, right.
Like, it sounds like he only wanted wealthy, upper-class graduates from elite boarding schools who speak with a certain accent.
And he explicitly anticipated that criticism. He clarified exactly what he meant because he actually despised the snobbery of the British class system.
Oh, he did?
Oh, yeah. By gentlemen, he was referring strictly to a behavioral and ethical standard. He meant people who are intellectually honest in an argument, honest with their clients, and honest with their suppliers.
So it was an ethical filter, not a class filter.
Exactly. He had a zero-tolerance policy for office politicians, toadies, and bullies.
Which every company says, but did he enforce it?
He did. Because he observed this very true psychological pattern, which he wrote down for his managers. He said the toadies, who sycophantically suck up to their bosses, are almost always the exact same people who ruthlessly bully their subordinates.
Oh, wow. That is so true.
Right. And he wanted that behavior entirely eradicated from his agency.
It reminds me of the philosophy behind building a championship sports team.
How so?
Well, a general manager might see a free agent with the best scoring stats in the league. But if that player is a narcissist who blames his teammates for every loss,
Right.
a smart manager won't draft him. Because one toxic superstar will completely poison the locker room dynamic, and suddenly the whole team is losing.
That is the exact mechanism. Ogilvy was hyper-aware that the character of the people you hire today fundamentally dictates the ceiling of your company's scale tomorrow.
Right.
And to illustrate this to his board of directors, he didn't just send a memo. He used a physical prop.
A prop.
Yeah, he ordered a set of Russian Matryoshka dolls.
The stacking wooden ones.
Exactly, the wooden nesting dolls that stank inside one another, and he placed one in front of every single director at a board meeting.
That's a very theatrical move for a guy who hated clowns in advertising. What was the point of the dolls?
Well, he had them open the dolls one by one until they reached the tiniest doll in the center.
Okay.
And inside that smallest doll, he had placed a tiny slip of paper with a message typed on it.
What did it say?
It read, "If you always hire people who are smaller than you are, we shall become a company of dwarfs. If, on the other hand, you always hire people who are bigger than you are, we shall become a company of giants."
Wow. That requires a terrifying amount of vulnerability from a leader.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, to actively build a company of giants, you have to intentionally seek out people who are smarter, more talented, and more charismatic than you are, and then put them in positions of power. You have to completely check your ego at the door.
And you have to embrace their weirdness, too.
Their weirdness.
Yeah, because if you are hiring brilliant people, they rarely fit into neat corporate boxes.
That's true.
There's this fantastic internal letter in the sources regarding a 29-year-old executive named Ken Brady who had just been appointed the head of Ogilvy and Mather in Jakarta.
Okay.
Ogilvy invited this young guy all the way to New York just to shake his hand, and he offered him one piece of advice. He said, "Develop your eccentricities while you're young. That way, when you get old, people won't think you're going gaga."
That's a charming piece of advice. But there's a real tactical advantage there, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Like, you can't ask an agency full of people to generate wildly original, out-of-the-box creative ideas if your HR department forces them to behave like they live on an assembly line.
You really can't. And that intellectual flexibility, it had to start at the top. Ogilvy demanded that his leaders possess the willingness to completely change their minds in the face of new evidence.
Which is notoriously hard for founders to do once they've written the rules of the company.
Very hard. But think about this. By 1977, Ogilvy had spent decades vehemently denouncing entertainment and cleverness in advertising.
Right, no clowns.
Right. He wanted hard-hitting, fact-based, cash register advertising. But suddenly, his staff started receiving memos from him complaining that their work was getting starchy and dull.
Wait, what?
Yeah. He started openly praising television commercials that seemed to violate his own sacred rule.
I can imagine the staff being completely bewildered, like, wait, David, you literally wrote the book telling us never to do it this way.
And they called him out on it.
They did.
They absolutely did. And his response reveals so much about his leadership. He essentially told them, look, we became so structurally sound, so fact-based, that we lost our brilliance. We need both.
Wow.
And to justify his complete reversal, he quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson to his staff. He said, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds."
So he was giving his entire company permission to evolve past his own outdated dogmas.
Exactly.
So, okay, you have this workforce of highly intelligent, somewhat eccentric giants, and you are giving them the freedom to challenge the rules. My question is, how does that not instantly devolve into utter chaos?
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah. How do you bind all these strong personalities together into a cohesive unit?
You bind them through the deliberate, almost aggressive engineering of corporate culture.
Okay.
Because today, company culture is a hollow buzzword. You know, it usually means a ping pong table in the break room and casual Fridays.
Yeah, free snack.
Right. But when Ogilvy addressed this in a 1985 speech, he framed it as a survival mechanism. He said the common characteristic of long-term success is the deliberate creation of a culture. And it is woven through shared values, shared rights, and a highly public understanding of what the company admires and what it despises.
He actually wrote down a literal list of things the company despised, didn't he?
He did, and high on the list of things he despised was pseudo-academic jargon.
Really?
Yeah, he specifically listed words that physically revolted him, terms like demassification or symbiotic linkage.
Symbiotic linkage. Why such visceral hatred for a few buzzwords? I mean, every industry has its jargon.
Because he understood the psychological mechanism behind jargon. He said people don't use words like symbiotic linkage to clarify a thought. They use them to obscure a lack of thought.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, jargon is a mask for intellectual cowardice. If you cannot explain a product's value in simple, crisp English, it means you don't actually understand the product. So he demanded reports be well-written, agonizingly clear, and short.
That makes total sense. And he also understood that culture isn't just how you speak, it's the physical space you occupy.
Yeah.
I read that when he opened the New York office in 1948, the walls were painted battleship gray.
Right.
But he quickly realized that environment was suppressing the work. So he had everything repainted vibrant white with bright red carpets.
He recognized the cognitive load of a physical environment. Advertising requires high-energy creative collisions, and dreary, gray, unkempt environments physically suppress that energy.
Right.
He held a very strong opinion on untidiness, writing to his staff that an untidy office suggests an untidy mind. Though he was practical enough to admit in the same memo that some very able men are terribly untidy, and some very stupid men are impeccably tidy.
That's a great caveat. He had a phrase for the specific energy he wanted in those white and red rooms, too. He called it divine discontent.
Yes, divine discontent is arguably the soul of the Ogilvy culture. He viewed smugness as a terminal disease for a creative agency.
So what does divine discontent look like in practice?
It's the habit of always striving to do better, looking at a highly successful campaign and immediately agonizing over how it could have been 10% sharper. But crucially, this perpetual dissatisfaction was balanced with an immense, unshakable internal pride.
And that pride was really evident in a story from the source text that revolves around the concept of modesty, wasn't it?
Bombay story, yes.
Right. So he is giving a talk to the Bombay Advertising Club in 1982. It's a huge crowd. And during the Q&A, someone asks him, Mr. Ogilvy, Indian advertising draws its inspiration from Madison Avenue. What about Madison Avenue? What is its source of inspiration?
And how did he respond to an entire auditorium waiting for a profound philosophical answer?
He literally just leaned into the microphone and said 2 words, modesty forbids.
It is a phenomenal answer.
It's so good.
He is flat out telling them, we are the source. Ogilvy and Mather is the inspiration for the rest of Madison Avenue.
Yeah.
It is funny, it's theatrical, but it served a massive cultural purpose. He wanted every single person on his payroll to deeply believe they were working at the absolute best agency in the world, because a collective sense of elite pride works miracles for productivity.
I believe that. But here is where I struggle to reconcile his philosophy.
Okay.
On one hand, he writes memos saying, kill grimness with laughter, maintain an atmosphere of informality, encourage exuberance.
Right.
But in the exact same breath, he enforces incredibly strict discipline. He demands staff arrive exactly on time. Telephones must be answered promptly on the first few rings. Absolute secrecy regarding client data must be policed like a military installation. Help me understand how you maintain a culture of exuberant informality while simultaneously acting like a drill sergeant about answering the phones.
Well, it looks like a contradiction until you look at how he defined the concept of fun.
Okay.
For a lot of modern companies, fun means a lack of pressure. It means goofing off. But Ogilvy believed in the Scottish proverb that hard work never killed a man. Men die of boredom and psychological conflict. For his team, the fun didn't come from being lazy. The fun came from the immense pride of doing superlative first-class work in a first-class way and winning.
So the strict discipline is actually what creates the safe environment for the fun to happen.
Exactly. Think about the mechanics of an office. If deadlines are constantly missed, if client secrets are leaked, if the basic administrative work is sloppy,
It's stressful.
it causes massive internal stress, interpersonal conflict, and just sheer grimness. Discipline removes that baseline chaos.
Wow.
As he phrased it to his leadership, he vastly preferred the discipline of knowledge to the anarchy of ignorance. You can be informal, you can laugh in the hallways, but you still have to deliver absolute excellence when you sit at your desk.
Okay, so we have the sales mechanics from the Aga days. We have the hiring of giants, and we have this culture of divine discontent and disciplined exuberance.
Right.
Now we have to look at the actual output of all this machinery, the brand.
Yes.
Because Ogilvy had a massive evolution in how he views the long-term value of a product, specifically regarding what he called the drug of deals.
This is perhaps the most vital strategic lesson in the entire archive, because it deals with the mathematical decay of a company's reputation.
The mathematical decay, let's dig into that.
Well, early in his career, Ogilvy was a strict disciple of the old Chicago philosophy of advertising, which was championed by a man named Claude Hopkins.
And for those who aren't familiar with advertising history, who was Claude Hopkins and what was that philosophy?
Claude Hopkins was a pioneer of direct response advertising in the early 1900s, and his philosophy was brutal and simple. Every single advertisement must stand entirely on its own 2 feet and immediately sell goods at a measurable profit.
Okay.
If an ad ran on Tuesday and didn't spike sales on Wednesday, it was considered a total failure. There was no concept of building awareness. It was just cash in, cash out.
Which makes total sense if you are a 24-year-old knocking on doors selling stoves. You need the commission today.
Right.
But you're saying Ogilvy abandoned this.
Dramatically. By 1955, he was giving speeches to the industry, openly admitting he had been wrong.
Wow.
He realized that the Claude Hopkins model was fundamentally flawed for building a legacy corporation. So he introduced the idea that every single advertisement, every radio spot, every piece of packaging is not an isolated sales pitch, but a long-term investment in the personality of the brand.
He called this the complex symbol, which is the brand image. Yeah.
Yes.
And this realization is what puts him at war with short-term financial tactics. Like, he issues these incredibly fiery warnings in his memos against brand managers who get addicted to price-cutting deals just to boost their quarterly earnings.
He literally diagnosed price cutting as a narcotic. He called deals a drug.
A drug.
Yeah, he explained the psychology behind it. A cut price offer or a massive discount code might induce a surge of new people to try a brand this week.
Right.
But once the deal is over, those consumers simply return to their habitual brands as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, you have trained your loyal customers to wait for a discount.
It makes me think of a sugar rush.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, like if you are exhausted, eating a candy bar gives you this massive immediate spike in energy. It feels great in the moment, just like a quick Q3 sales bump from a 50% off sale.
Right.
But an hour later, your blood sugar crashes, you feel more depleted than before, and your body becomes reliant on the next hit of sugar just to function. Whereas building brand image is like a long-term fitness and nutrition plan. It requires intense daily discipline. You don't see results by Tuesday, but it builds sustainable, unshakable strength over years.
That is the exact physiological equivalent of what happens to a company's balance sheet. He wrote that these brand managers are eating their seed corn.
Eating their seed corn.
Yeah, they are systematically destroying the prestigious brand equity that was painstakingly built by their predecessors over decades, just so they can hit a short-term metric and collect a year-end bonus.
It's terrifying when you put yourself in the shoes of a mid-level manager today, though, because you're constantly pressured by shareholders to hit Q3 targets.
Always.
So Ogilvy is essentially demanding that you willingly miss your Q3 bonus and take the heat from your boss in order to protect the company's Q10 reputation. That is an incredibly difficult thing to execute in modern corporate America.
It is extremely difficult, but it is the only way to build a legacy, and that long-term strength is ultimately built on how you view the person handing you the money.
The consumer.
Right.
Perhaps his most famous quote of all time addresses this exact dynamic. He said, "The consumer is not a moron. She's your wife." Dare I insult her intelligence?
Let's unpack the mechanics of that quote, because in the context of mid-century advertising, men were primarily the ones creating campaigns, and they were selling household products largely to female homemakers.
Right.
And there was a tendency to talk down to them, to use cheap gimmicks.
Exactly. Ogilvy was telling his industry, stop treating the buyer like a gullible idiot you can trick with a flashy jingle or a deceptive discount.
Yeah.
If you would not lie to your own spouse, do not lie in your copy. If you cheapen the product with constant deals, you cheapen the brand in her eyes. You must respect her intellect enough to give her the factual data she needs to make an informed decision.
He applied this uncompromising standard to how clients should treat agencies too, didn't he? There is a note about agency fees in the source material.
He did. He
Yeah.
constantly saw corporate clients haggling over the agency's standard 15% commission.
And he told them they were looking through the wrong end of the telescope. Instead of trying to squeeze a few pennies out of the agency's fee, they should focus their energy on getting vastly better sales results from the 85% they were spending on media space.
Wow, that makes sense.
He summed it up with a line that applies to hiring in literally any industry. He said, "Pay peanuts and you get monkeys."
Pay peanuts and you get monkeys. Don't sacrifice prestige or quality for a quick buck, whether you are pricing your product, protecting your brand equity, or paying your talent.
Exactly.
We have covered an immense amount of ground here. I mean, we started with the intense psychological warfare of selling aga cookers in the 1930s. We moved into the vulnerability of hiring giants in the 60s, engineered a culture of divine discontent in the 80s, and explored the mathematical decay of brand equity.
It's a lot.
If we have to synthesize David Ogilvy's unfiltered 50-year philosophy into its core essence, what is the single through line?
Well, if you distill all the confidential memos, the sales manuals, and the speeches down to their atomic level, it all revolves around one unforgettable mechanism.
Which is?
Absolute respect is the engine of commercial success.
Absolute respect.
Yeah. Think about how it connects every phase of his career. When he was a young man selling the aga cooker, he demanded his salesmen conduct obsessive research because you must respect the prospect's specific lifestyle and time.
Right.
When he built his executive team, he demanded gentlemen with brains because he respected ethical character over pure, ruthless ambition.
Yeah.
When he engineered the office culture, he demanded first-class work and killed pseudo-academic jargon because he respected the clarity of the craft.
The divine discontent.
Exactly. And when he created global advertising campaigns, he treated the consumer like his own spouse, respecting her intelligence enough to give her facts instead of clownish entertainment.
It is the absolute antithesis of the snake oil salesman stereotype.
It really is.
He didn't achieve commercial success through manipulation. He achieved it through profound empathy. And there is an interview in the source material from when he was 75 years old, living in his chateau in France.
Oh, this is a great one.
An interviewer asks him to artist what he ultimately owed his massive success.
And true to form, he refused to give the polite, socially acceptable answer.
Right.
He told the interviewer that fashionable, modest people always just say luck. But Ogilvy stated plainly that he didn't believe in luck.
Okay, so what did he attribute it to?
He attributed his empire to being highly objective, working incredibly hard, and being a superlative salesman. But he added one more trait that perfectly illustrates your point about empathy.
I remember this. He recalled a conversation with a former executive who told him, "David, you're very good at selling things to women. Because you are a woman. You think as women think."
Right.
Which, again, given the era, was a profound compliment.
Definitely.
His ability to strip away his own ego and deeply inhabit the perspective, the anxieties, and the desires of the end consumer was his ultimate superpower.
He didn't want to manipulate the buyer. He wanted to understand them so deeply that the sale became a mutual benefit.
Yeah.
You know, he wanted to solve their actual problems, whether it was curing a cook's backache with the perfect height of an August stove or making a tired manager feel like a vacation was attainable through a beautifully written Cravel ad.
It completely elevates the concept of sales from a dirty word to an act of service.
Oh.
Which actually brings me to a story from the text that I think perfectly encapsulates this entire deep dive.
Oh, the encounter with the Queen?
Yes. So at the height of his success, David Ogilvy actually meets the Queen of England. And as they are making conversation, the Queen asks him what he does for a living.
Right.
When he tells her he is in advertising, he noted that she looked at him with a mixture of horror, incredulity, and amusement. It was as if he had just confessed to a deeply vulgar, dirty profession.
And the way he internally processed that royal judgment is just beautiful.
Yeah.
He remembered a Latin phrase carved into the walls of his old school, fets, quid vis recte factum, quamvis humile, preclarum.
Which translates to, whatever you do in life, however humble, is okay if you do it right.
Exactly. He pointed out in his writings that the esteemed founder of his prestigious school, Sir William Fetts, wasn't royalty. He was just a grocer.
He sold goods.
He sold goods, but he did it right. And Ogilvy viewed his own life's work through that exact same lens. He was an advertising man. He was a salesman.
Yeah.
But he approached that humble trade with such intense, unyielding discipline and such profound respect for the people he was serving that he elevated a vulgar trade into a true, undeniable profession.
So the provocative thought I want to leave everyone to mull over today is this. Take a hard look at your own work. Regardless of your title, regardless of the industry you are in, are you doing your humble work so well and with such absolute respect for the end user that it transcends the job description? Are you building a legacy of first-class work?
It is the ultimate challenge he leaves behind in these unpublished pages.
It really is. Well, we've seen how David Ogilvy used discipline and respect to build a physical empire. But what happens to these principles when physical offices disappear entirely?
Oh, that's a big question.
How does a deliberate corporate culture survive in a purely remote digital world where you can't control the color of the walls or the energy in the room?
Oh.
We are going to be unpacking that exact collision in our next deep dive. So, imagine a guy. He's 38 years old.
Okay.
And he's an unemployed college dropout.
Not a great start.
Right. Let's look at his resume. He's been a cook, a door-to-door salesman, a diplomat, and a farmer.
A farmer. Wow. Okay.
And he knows absolutely nothing about marketing. I mean, he has never written a single word of advertising copy in his entire life. But he professes to be, interested in advertising as a career. At 38, mind you. And he wants a salary of $5,000 a year.
Yeah, I mean, in today's corporate infrastructure, that application never even reaches a human being.
No, not a chance.
It's like an applicant tracking system just flags the lack of keywords, the employment gaps, and the sheer chronological confusion of his career, and it just quietly deletes it into the digital abyss.
Exactly. It's gone. But we know the public genius that eventually emerged from this completely unlikely background, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because that unemployed farmer was David Ogilvy, who obviously went on to build one of the largest advertising empires on the planet.
Yeah, the 10th biggest ad agency in the world within just a few years.
Right. But today, we're not looking at his polished public campaigns. We are doing a deep dive into a curated collection of his private, internal notes, memos, and letters to his staff and board of directors.
Which are just fascinating.
They really are.
Yeah.
We're going to see how a genius actually communicated behind closed doors, because his real secret wasn't just marketing. It was this brutal, eccentric system of human psychology and corporate architecture.
Yeah, these documents, I mean, they really offer a masterclass in stripped-down communication. If you are building a business, managing a team, or just trying to navigate a sprawling corporate hierarchy today, these memos show that lasting influence isn't built on academic jargon.
Right. None of that business school speak.
Exactly. It's built on absolute clarity, demanding standards, and quite honestly, a ruthless pragmatism that most companies are just too scared to enforce today.
Okay, let's unpack this. So I want to start right where we opened, with that bizarre resume.
Yeah, the 38-year-old dropout.
Yeah. So that story actually comes from a memo Ogilvy wrote to an executive in 1971. It's titled, "Will Any Agency Hire This Man?"
Such a great title.
It is. And he basically outlines his own origins to make this pointed argument about talent acquisition. He concludes the memo by stating that it sometimes pays an agency to be imaginative and unorthodox in hiring.
Right.
But I want to look at the mechanics of why that is. Why actively seek out the unorthodox? Because if you're running a massive agency, wouldn't a predictable cookie-cutter candidate from a top-tier business school just be a safer bet?
Well, see, safe is precisely what Ogilvy was trying to avoid. Because safe hiring produces safe work.
Interesting.
Advertising, at its core, it requires lateral thinking.
Right.
It requires connecting disparate dots to capture human attention.
Okay.
So a person who has been a chef, a diplomat, and a farmer has a vastly wider database of human experience to draw from than someone who has, only ever sat in marketing seminars.
Oh, I see what you mean. They just have more raw material to work with.
Exactly. Ogilvy realized that if you staff an agency entirely with people who have the exact same academic pedigree, you create an intellectual monoculture.
A monoculture, right.
Yeah, they will all approach a client's problem from the exact same angle.
Yeah.
And in advertising, if you blend in, you lose.
Right, you're invisible. Which actually brings us to the follow-up memo he sends to his board of directors later that same year.
Oh, the gentleman memo?
Yes. The subject line is "Gentlemen with Brains." He tells his board that the agency must hire gentlemen with brains. Now, I really struggle with this phrasing.
Sir, it sounds dated.
Yeah, gentleman is an incredibly loaded word. It evokes a very specific elitist country club image. And in the context of 1960s and 70s advertising, an industry famously built on cutthroat competition and stealing accounts, wouldn't hiring a bunch of polite gentlemen just make you soft targets? Don't you actually need killers to survive?
It definitely sounds like a contradiction until you look at how he actively redefines the term for his board.
Okay, how so?
Well, he explicitly adds a postscript stating that by gentlemen, he does not mean old Etonians. He isn't talking about wealthy socialites or aristocratic breeding.
Right, not the trust fund kids.
Exactly. He is talking about a very specific mechanical function of leadership, which is character.
Character.
Yeah. He quotes John Loudon, the former head of Shell, who argued that character is the most important trait in leadership. Ogilvy assumes that all the top-tier agencies have professional competence, like raw skill is just the baseline.
It's table stakes.
Right, it doesn't differentiate you. What actually wins a client's trust, and more importantly, what keeps it during a crisis, is the character of the people representing the agency.
I mean, I hear that, but I'm still skeptical.
Really?
Yeah, like if I'm a client and my sales are tanking, I don't really care if the account executive is a person of high moral character. I want the mercenary who is going to ruthlessly dismantle the competition and get my market share back.
Sure, in the short term. But consider the long-term economics of hiring a mercenary. Mercenaries are motivated solely by immediate expediency. If you hire killers, as you put it, they will eventually turn that killer instinct inward.
Oh, wow. I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, they will poach your clients, they'll sabotage internal teams to climb the ladder, or they'll cut ethical corners that ultimately destroy the agency's reputation.
Right. It's like assembling a heist crew.
Yes, perfect analogy.
You don't just want the best safecracker in the world. Because if that safecracker lacks the character to stick to the plan when the sirens sound, they will absolutely sell you out to the cops to save themselves.
Exactly. And in business, the cops are budget cuts, shifting markets, and PR crises.
Right.
Ogilvy noted that compromising on character for raw skill might win a quick pitch, but it does permanent damage to the corporate structure.
So if you are a listener building a team right now, the practical takeaway here is to decouple your assessment of talent from standard issue credentials. You have to actively hunt for that unorthodox background. The person with a weird resume who brings a different cognitive toolkit. But you must pair that with an uncompromising filter for character.
Right. The unorthodox background provides the creative leverage, and the high character ensures they don't blow up the company from the inside.
Right, so the background can be wildly unconventional, but the integrity must be orthodox and absolute.
Beautifully put.
Okay, but you can hire all the high character talent in the world, and if you drop them into a broken bureaucratic system, they are going to produce garbage.
Oh, 100%. The system dictates the output.
Which brings us to how Ogilvy actually structured his agency. In a 1978 memo, he describes his company not as a corporation, but as a teaching hospital.
I love this concept.
It's brilliant. He argues that great hospitals do two simultaneous things. They look after patients, and they teach young doctors. Therefore, his agency must look after clients while teaching young advertising people.
And the choice of a hospital metaphor over a university metaphor is super critical to understand here.
Why is that?
Well, he explicitly rejected a rival agency's claim that they were the quote-unquote university of advertising.
Oh, okay.
Because a university operates on theory. You write papers, you debate concepts, but if you fail, you just get a lower grade. There is no real-world fallout.
Right, nobody actually gets hurt.
Exactly. A teaching hospital is operational. It is life and death. The attending physicians, so the senior copywriters and directors, they're performing actual surgery while the residents assist.
Wow, yeah.
If they make a mistake in a teaching hospital, the patient bleeds. In Ogilvy's world, if the junior staff makes a mistake, the client loses real money.
The mechanics of that are fascinating because it forces senior management to stay engaged with the actual work.
Yes, you can't hide in an office.
Right, you can't just be an administrator in a teaching hospital. You have to be on the floor, scrubbing in, demonstrating the craft.
And that is precisely the standard Ogilvy felt was slipping away in corporate America, which he illustrates just beautifully and kind of brutally in this undated memo where he transcribes a conversation he supposedly overheard on an airplane.
Oh my gosh, this memo. It's essentially a piece of satirical theater, but it highlights a massive structural flaw in large businesses.
Tell the story. It's so good.
Okay, so Ogilvy says he overhears a passenger asking a man what he does for a living. And the man proudly states he is an account executive in an ad agency.
Right.
So the passenger asks, oh, you write ads. The executive says, no, the copywriters do that. Do you do the research? No, the research people do that. Do you sell the ads to the clients? No, the copywriters do that. Do you bring in new clients? No, it's not my job.
It just keeps going.
Right. And finally, the bewildered passenger asks, "Forgive me, but what exactly is your job?" The executive replies, "I'm a marketing man." The passenger asks, "You do marketing for the clients?" The executive says, "No, they do it themselves."
And here's the kicker.
Right, the punchline comes when the passenger asks, "Are you in management?" And the executive replies, "No, but I soon will be."
It's just so devastating. That dialogue entirely exposes the gelatinous middle layer of modern corporate structure.
Gelatinous middle layer. I love that.
It is the phenomenon of fake work. You have a class of employees who are entirely disconnected from the primary output of the business.
Wait, let me challenge that for a second. Because as a company scales to the size of an Ogilvy and Mather, operating across dozens of countries with thousands of employees, don't you absolutely need a layer of managers just to organize the chaos?
Sure.
Like, you can't have thousands of copywriters running around without someone coordinating the logistics, the budgets, and the client relations.
Coordination is necessary, yes. But this memo is targeting employees who manage the process of work without contributing to the substance of the work.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think of it mechanically. That's like adding extra transmission gears to a vehicle without actually connecting them to the wheels.
Right.
These gears are spinning, they are generating heat, they are burning fuel, which in business translates to salaries and meeting hours, but they aren't translating any power to the road. The car isn't going any faster.
Wow. Yeah, they're just spinning in place.
Exactly. Ogilvy was terrified of this corporate creep where the teaching hospital basically devolves into a holding pen for bureaucrats, and their only tangible output is scheduling meetings about the work other people are doing.
Which happens everywhere now. So if you are listening and evaluating your own role or auditing your company's organizational chart, you have to look for those disconnected gears.
Absolutely.
Ask yourself, are you scrubbing in on the hospital floor, or are you the guy on the airplane waiting for a management title while producing absolutely nothing? If your job disappeared tomorrow, would the actual product or service your company delivers change at all?
And if the honest answer is no, you are highly vulnerable to being cut the moment the budget gets tight.
Without a doubt. Okay, so we've established the need for unorthodox talent and a teaching hospital structure. Let's look at the actual work these people are producing.
The output.
Right. You would assume a man running a massive creative agency would be obsessed with art, aesthetics, and creative expression. But Ogilvy had a very clinical definition of what made an advertisement, quote-unquote, good.
Very clinical.
In a 1980 memo, he lays down this iron law. He says, the better the advertising, the more profitable the office. The worse the advertising, the more money the office loses. He binds creative standards directly and unapologetically to the cash register.
Yes. And to enforce this, he sent a grueling memo in July of 1979 to his creative directors. It was titled, "Are You the Greatest?"
Such an intimidating subject line to get from the boss.
Oh, totally terrifying. And it is a checklist of 37 highly specific questions designed to audit the mechanics of their daily work. He is completely bypassing subjective opinions about art and just interrogating their processes.
Let's dig into the mechanisms of a few of these questions, because I think they reveal his obsession with consumer psychology.
Yeah, let's do it.
So one of the things he asks his directors is, have you stopped using visual cliches like sunsets and happy families at the dinner table? Do you use lots of visual surprises? Now, why are sunsets and happy families a problem?
They seem fine, right?
Right, they're universally pleasant images. Shouldn't pleasant imagery associate positive feelings with a brand?
Well, pleasant imagery actually fails psychologically because of habituation.
Habituation?
Yeah, the human brain is essentially an efficiency machine. It aggressively filters out familiar, non-threatening stimuli to conserve energy.
Oh, sure. Like how you stop noticing a hum in the room after a few minutes.
Exactly. So when a consumer flips through a magazine and sees a generic sunset or a stock photo of a family smiling at a dinner table, their visual cortex immediately categorizes it as background noise.
And they just keep flipping.
Right. They turn the page without reading a single word of the copy. Ogilvy understood that to capture attention, you must introduce a pattern interrupt.
A pattern interrupt.
Yes. A visual surprise creates a momentary cognitive friction. The brain stops and says, wait, what is this? That split second of friction is literally the only window you have to deliver the sales pitch.
That makes so much sense. I mean, think about scrolling on your phone today. If an ad looks like a generic ad, you scroll right past it. But if it starts with some weird, visually jarring image, your thumb stops.
Exactly. It's the same psychology, just a different medium.
Okay, that explains another one of his questions on that list.
Yeah.
He asks, do all your headlines contain the brand name and the promise?
Yes.
He isn't asking if the headlines are clever or poetic. He's demanding structural utility.
Because he tracked the data, he was obsessed with research, he knew that the vast majority of consumers read the headline and skip the body copy entirely.
Really, just skip it.
Oh yeah, so if you write a cryptic, clever headline that requires the reader to read the next 3 paragraphs just to understand what you are selling, you have already lost 80% of your audience.
Wow.
The headline has to perform the entire heavy lifting. It has to say who we are and what we will do for you.
He also asks in that same memo if the directors physically paste their advertisements into magazines or newspapers before approving them. This seems incredibly tedious to me. Why not just look at the mock-up on the art director's desk?
It comes down to contextual friction.
Contextual friction. Okay, explain that.
When you look at an advertisement mounted on a clean, white foam board in a quiet conference room, it looks like a masterpiece.
Right.
The contrast is perfect, the negative space is beautiful, everyone claps, but that is not where the consumer encounters it.
Right, they encountered it out in the wild.
Right. They encounter it crammed onto a chaotic magazine page, surrounded by dense editorial text, competing images, and bold headlines. By physically pasting the ad into a real publication, Ogilvy forced his directors to see if their work could actually survive the visual noise, the real world.
That is so practical.
Yeah.
Yet for a man laying out 37 rigorous questions to demand the highest possible creative execution, he does this ideological pivot later that seems completely contradictory.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, in 1983, he sends a memo to his directors warning them about a new book he's written called Ogilvy on Advertising.
A classic.
It is. But he actually apologizes for the contents of his own book in the memo. He states, "You may feel that the book errs on the side of being anti-creative and pro-cash register." Here's my question. How can the author of a 37-point checklist for creative excellence call himself anti-creative?
It requires parsing his specific definition of creativity. Ogilvy was violently opposed to what he called pseudo-creativity.
Pseudo-creativity.
Right. In his view, advertising was not a medium for self-expression. It was a medium of salesmanship. A commercial that functions as a beautiful, award-winning short film but fails to clearly state why a consumer should buy the product is a catastrophic failure.
Regardless of how many industry awards it wins.
Exactly. He felt that the advertising industry had become obsessed with entertaining each other rather than selling products for the client. To him, the ultimate, indisputable metric of true creativity was the cash register ringing.
He draws a hard line in that memo, saying he believes more new business will be attracted by his cash register philosophy than will be repelled by his attacks on pseudo-creativity.
He didn't care who he offended.
But if we stop the analysis right there, we paint a picture of a joyless, rigid accountant.
Yeah, a bean counter.
Right. And that wasn't him at all. My absolute favorite piece of this entire collection is a tiny scribbled note responding to a query.
Oh, this is the best.
It's so funny. Someone apparently questioned the factual accuracy of a bizarre story Ogilvy frequently used to illustrate the success of a specific advertisement. And Ogilvy just replies, "I made it up years ago. Poetic license. It always gets a laugh. So shut up."
It's just so shut up. I love it. But that note, as funny as it is, it reveals his mastery of the theatrical nature of leadership.
How so?
He understood that pure, unadulterated pragmatism is incredibly dry. If you just stand in front of a room and quote sales statistics, people tune out. They get bored.
Right, their eyes glaze over.
Exactly. Sometimes, to effectively transfer an idea into someone's mind, you need the Trojan horse of a good story.
A Trojan horse, that's a great way to put it.
You need a narrative that makes them laugh, that lowers their defenses, and basically makes the core lesson memorable. He was totally willing to sacrifice literal historical accuracy in a harmless anecdote to achieve a broader pedagogical victory.
So tying this together for the listener's own work, creativity isn't about artistic abstraction or chasing industry accolades. It is a mechanical tool used to solve a specific problem and generate a measurable result.
Yes, cash in the register.
But while you are rigorously focused on the outcome, you cannot abandon your humanity. You still have to charm people, tell stories, and occasionally deploy a little poetic license to get a team aligned behind a dry, pragmatic goal.
The discipline to focus on the numbers must be paired with the charisma to make people care about the number.
That's the balance, which transitions seamlessly into his personal eccentricities and his rules for how information should flow through a company.
Oh, his rules were legendary.
In a 1982 memo titled How to Write, he establishes the foundational law of communication at Ogilvy and Mather. His very first premise is, the better you write, The higher you go in Ogilvy and Mather, people who think well, write well. He makes no distinction at all between writing ability and intellectual clarity.
Because he views writing as the ultimate test of thought.
Okay, expand on that.
If you cannot articulate a concept clearly on a piece of paper, it is a diagnostic indicator that your understanding of the concept is flawed.
Wow, that's heavy.
It is, but it's true. Writing forces you to organize your logic. It forces you to eliminate contradictions and establish a clear sequence of causality. If your writing is a mess, your thinking is a mess.
And he offers really practical mechanisms for this. He tells his staff to read their writing aloud the next morning before sending it, which forces you to hear the clunky, bureaucratic jargon that creeps into corporate emails.
Synergy, bandwidth, all that stuff.
Right. He demands that the requested action be crystal clear. But it is his golden rule, rule number 10, that I find the most challenging, especially today.
The action rule.
Yes. He writes, if you want action, don't write. Go and tell the guy what you want. Now, this seems wildly inefficient to me.
Does it?
Yeah. If I have an agency of thousands of people and everyone is constantly getting up and interrupting each other at their desks to demand action, wouldn't that destroy everyone's flow state?
Yeah.
Isn't an email vastly more efficient?
See, you have to separate information transfer from action generation.
Okay.
Text is an excellent medium for transferring complex information, like a budget breakdown, a historical timeline, a data set. You want that in an email.
Right. So you can reference it.
Exactly. But text is a terrible medium for generating immediate action because it allows for ambiguity and delay.
Ah.
The recipient can claim they didn't see the email, they can misinterpret the tone, or they can CC 5 other people to dilute the responsibility.
The classic reply-all deflection.
We've all seen it.
Yeah.
But when you walk into someone's office and look them in the eye and say, I need this done by Tuesday, you eliminate the friction of ambiguity. It forces an immediate verbal contract. Ogilvy recognized that paperwork is often used as a shield by people who are afraid of the interpersonal friction required to actually manage a project.
It's weaponized passivity.
Yes, weaponized passivity.
We see this constantly today with the endless Slack thread or the 20-reply email chain where everyone is engaged in this paper warfare to prove they are working, but no actual work is being accomplished.
Exactly. And this ruthless intolerance for inefficiency, it extended far beyond his writing rules. It totally dictated how he managed his physical environment and his time.
Okay, let's examine the travel demands, because honestly, they border on the absurd.
And are intense.
In 1986, an Australian journalist compiling a book on lengthy careers asked Ogilvy how he had lasted so long. And Ogilvy responds with a document titled David Ogilvy's Marathon Innings.
That's a great title.
It is a hyper-specific list of his non-negotiable travel rules. He says, I hate cocktail parties. He writes, please don't meet me at the railroad station and please don't see me off. I hate that. Let me arrive and depart on my own. He demands not to be put in a suite at the hotel, stating, a bedroom is what I like. He requires a small office and a daily copy of the New York Times. And he specifies, I hate drinking in bars and have to start eating the moment I sit down in restaurants. Waiting for food puts me in a foul mood.
He knew what he wanted.
But I have to push back here. If any modern executive sent this list ahead of a business trip today, they would be labeled a toxic micromanager. How is this not just the unchecked ego of an aging titan, forcing everyone to cater to his whims?
You have to look closely at the specific nature of the demands. Diva demands are usually about extracting luxury and status, right?
Like the bowl of green M&Ms only.
Exactly. Demanding the presidential suite, the red carpet rollout, the obsequious entourage at the train station. Ogilvy is actively rejecting luxury.
That's true. He refused the suite.
Right. He refuses the suite. He refuses the entourage at the station. What he is engineering is the complete elimination of decision fatigue and social friction.
By stripping away the performative aspects of corporate travel.
Yes. Small talk at a train station drains cognitive energy. Navigating a noisy cocktail party drains energy. Waiting for a table in a bar drains energy. By his 70s, he understood his own biological and psychological constraints perfectly. He knew that to remain effective, to be able to walk into a room the next morning and dismantle a flawed advertising campaign, he had to aggressively protect his mental reserves. He wasn't demanding that people cater to his ego. He was demanding that people not waste his finite energy on corporate theater.
That reframes it entirely. It's a mechanism for operational endurance.
Exactly.
If you want to last in a high-stress industry, you must audit what drains your energy and set titanium boundaries to protect it. Like, you probably don't have the leverage to demand that a restaurant has your food on the table the millisecond you pull out your chair.
Probably not.
But you absolutely have the agency to decline the mandatory fun cocktail party that leaves you exhausted for the actual pitch the next day.
Right. Strategic eccentricity is a tool for boundary setting. It looks like arrogance to the outsider, but it is an operational necessity for the practitioner.
Okay, we have covered a massive amount of ideological ground here today.
We really have.
We have discussed the necessity of unorthodox talent with orthodox character. We've dissected the mechanics of the teaching hospital versus the bloat of the management class.
The fake work.
Right. We've explored the psychological failure of visual cliches, the hard metrics of the cash register, and the aggressive energy management of his travel rules. How do we synthesize all of this? Is there a unifying mechanism that connects the ruthless pragmatism of his business sense with the deep eccentricity of his personal rules?
There is, and the synthesis is actually found in a single piece of advice he gave to his creative staff. It was the 97th tip in a long list titled, "Raise Your Sights."
Okay, what did it say?
He wrote, "Whenever you write a commercial, bear in mind that it is likely to be seen by your children, your wife, and your conscience."
Wow.
Yeah.
That one sentence is really the soul of this entire collection of memos.
It changes everything.
Because for all the bluster about profits and the brutal critiques of pseudo-creativity and the clinical focus on the cash register ringing, he fundamentally viewed business as a deeply moral endeavor.
It reveals the ultimate paradox required for lasting professional success.
Which is?
You must be relentlessly pragmatic about effectiveness. If the advertisement doesn't sell the product, it is a failure. If an employee is spinning their gears in the middle management layer without producing output, they are a liability.
Right. The cash register is the undeniable metric of reality.
Yes. However, if you pursue the cash register without an uncompromising standard of personal integrity, the system eventually collapses.
Because if you run a deceptive ad just to spike quarterly sales, you might win in the short term. But you erode the trust of the consumer, you disgust your high-character employees, and, as Ogilvy points out, you have to look your family in the eye knowing you put manipulative garbage into the world.
Exactly. You have to care about your conscience.
He proves that the conscience and the cash register are not mutually exclusive forces. They are a feedback loop.
A feedback loop. I like that.
Yeah, think about it. Hiring people with immense character reduces internal friction and makes the agency more profitable. Refusing to deploy visual cliches forces you to respect the consumer's intelligence, which leads to more effective communication. Declining to run an ad that would embarrass your family forces you to go back to the drawing board and engineer a superior, more compelling argument. The conscience drives the cash register.
The conscience drives the cash register. I think that is the definitive takeaway.
It really is. Well, as we wrap up this session on Ogilvy's private memos, a massive question remains. We now know how he communicated behind closed doors, with his potent mixture of brutal honesty, mechanical precision, and high moral standards.
Right.
But how do we take that highly personal philosophy and scale it across thousands of employees in dozens of countries?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. So next time, we will explore exactly how a company's culture dictates its survival on a global stage.
Scaling the teaching hospital without letting it become a bureaucracy is the ultimate test of leadership.
Absolutely. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We discussed Ogilvy's rule that if you want real action, you shouldn't write a memo at all. You should go directly talk to the person.
Rule number 10.
Right. So look at your own calendar in your own inbox right now. Look at the threads you are CC'd on. How much of your modern day-to-day productivity is actually just paper warfare, hiding a fear of direct confrontation?
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.